Good day there once again, viewers. This is your mate Kamikaze78 here, coming to you guys with some more Planetside 2 content. Today guys, we're going to be taking a look at the NS-03 Thumper heavy weapon that was released recently to the live servers and then was updated once again in the patch that hit the game soon after on the 5th of the 7th 2019. Now this has been a weapon that has sparked a little bit of curiosity and controversy within the community, as when there was, the announcement made by the DBG team that the weapon was coming, people were a little bit concerned about how a grenade launcher that was anti-infantry focused would play out, and whether it would be a little too spammy. And the devs had the same mindset, as they confirmed that they released the weapon in an incredibly reserved format to ensure that it didn't affect balance too badly, and thus we now have the updated version that we're going to be reviewing tonight. As you guys all know, with my reviews we go over the stats of the weapon, followed up by discussing some weapon specific strategy and the attachment options available to the weapon, but let's be frank, attachment options aren't exactly going to be a huge issue here. But firstly, for those who are a little bit time poor, let's do a quick TLDR of the weapon. So, the Thumper. Let me get this out of the way really quickly guys. If you thought that this weapon was going to be the next overpowered devilish concoction to have made an appearance on the battlefield, you were going to be sorely disappointed. The Thumper is, don't get me wrong, a fun idea and in the right situation can be a grand old time, but don't expect to go destroying enemies in straight 1v1s every single engagement. Any old skilled heavy assault, or any class for that matter, will wipe the floor with you with confidence if you miss just a singular shot. But just what are the right situations, I hear you asking? Well, if you come across a choke point where two factions are locked into a dead set shit-stirring fight, well then you might find some use out of the weapon for some general damage saturation. Score a direct hit on a target and you will see yourself potentially nailing a kill or a handsome amount of damage on the cheeky fucker that keeps trying to one-tap you with a sniper rifle. The incendiary ammo in these situations can be good fun, but don't hit your teammates unless you want some really dodgy looks being pointed your way, and a couple of weapon locks here and there. But despite these fun moments, and trust me, these moments are stupidly fun to be a part of, the weapon is just limited. You can't go using it that well in uphill battles, and straight 1v1s are going to be a hassle here too, unless you can be incredibly accurate. It is a great area suppression weapon, and is often best used with some teammates using it in toe-to-toe to cover each other's lengthy reload times, but it isn't what I would call a must-own. And without the ASP perk that lets you put it in your secondary weapon slot, it can be very limiting on your abilities as a heavy assault, which is kind of meant to be the spearhead of a force. Anyway, I know some of you are here for a more in-depth look, so let's go over some of the stats of the weapon for a more elaborate look. So let's start off with the damage here. Obviously this is going to be the major concern surrounding the Thumper and has been ever since it was announced, and well, with the recent buffs, just how good can it be? Well, it now dishes out a total of 250 direct impact damage, as well as a maximum indirect damage of 350 before the 0.5 meter mark, and a minimum indirect damage of 100 after the 3 meter mark, which means that on a direct impact, the weapon can kill a fresh target in 2 hits, and if you hit within the maximum splash damage range, basically at an enemy's feet, you can knock them out in 3 shots. But if you taper too far out, it will actually take 10 shots to nail a target, which at that point, you're really just trying to saturate an area with damage and sort of be the area denial role of a squad, if you will. Now, one thing to quickly consider here is the damage type that this thing deals, which is explosive damage. This in turn gives max suits a 50% resistance to the weapon's damage, and also gives flashes a 25% resistance to the damage. However, above that, all other vehicles will take no damage from this weapon, so no, it isn't a replacement to the trusty decimator for both vehicles or max suits. Be prepared to whip out the rocket launcher when needed. As far as the rate of fire is concerned, it's going to be firing 86 rounds per minute or 1.4 rounds per second, which really does put a huge amount of pressure on you to score a direct hit on your first shot in a firefight to net a kill. Otherwise, the refire time is just too slow to make up for the lost time, unless you're going against a guy who doesn't know how to aim, in which case you may have a chance. Time to kill will vary between what kind of damage tier you hit. If you score direct damage hits across the board, you will net yourself a 0.7 second time to kill, which is on par with lower end damage tier weapons at longer ranges. I know that doesn't sound too flash, but hey, you gotta take what you can get. The time to kill does extend out to 1.4 seconds if you hit your shots within the maximum splash damage range, and well, it just isn't worth discussing the time to kill beyond that, because you simply don't have enough rounds in a magazine to make the kill if all your rounds deal, the damage in the minimum slash damage range. It just isn't worth discussing at all. Anyway, enough about damage. Moving on to weapon handling. The recoil of the weapon isn't going to be a huge issue here, considering that we do have a slower rate of fire on a semi-automatic weapon, which gives you enough time to sort of counteract the recoil in your own way. But there is a half decent upwards kick, and the weapon can kick left or right, but once again, the recoil is really negligible, all things considered here. For those who do want to know the stats, there is a 1 degree vertical kick per shot, but because you're always going to be initiating a burst with the weapon unless you mount the automatic receiver, the 1.5 times first shot multiplier brings it up to an effective recoil of 1.5 degrees every shot. Horizontal recoil here is going to be anywhere within a 0.2 and 0.25 degree minimum maximum range, with the tolerance of 0.6 degrees, which means that you may have to readjust left or right after every shot to stay on target, but again, nothing huge here to worry about. The most important element here is actually the cone of fire values, and as we can see here, there is a pretty significant benefit to aiming down sights and not moving at all. The last thing you're going to want to do with this weapon is clap an ally accidentally, because let's be honest, if you clap an ally, you're probably going to clap about the 3 others that are standing around him, or you also don't want to snag a doorway and waste a round. So the importance of maintaining good movement practice when firing this weapon is kind of going to be the make or break here. The magazine here sits at 6 rounds with a 48 round ammo pool, which appears to be reloaded in a 4.25 second time regardless of whether or not you empty the mag. The stats pages on some sites read that it has a 1.25 second short reload, but yeah, I can guarantee it isn't that quick, so I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. On top of that, you are greeted by a movement multiplier for using the weapon whether or not you're aiming down sights. The standard 0.5 times is still here, as we would expect for when you are ADSing, but whenever you're not and you're just plain moving around with the weapon, your movement is going to be hit by a 0.9 times movement multiplier. So yeah, you are just one big chunky boy when using this gun. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the Thumper. Now, if any of you guys have caught my streams lately, you will know that despite the weapon's buffs, I think that the weapon is just one big old meme. I have had some brief moments of stupid fun with it, and I'm not gonna lie, purposely gimping yourself to get a laugh out of killing people with this thing could be considered a goddamn art form in itself. But overall, the Thumper right now is just a case of an interesting idea, but needs a little bit more work on the whole execution front. And unfortunately, there isn't exactly a simple solution. With this style of weapon, it isn't a matter of increasing the damage or the rate of fire or any one stat, because the nature of the weapon and the nature of Planetside 2 means that if the Thumper becomes a powerful enough weapon to sensibly replace an LMG for a primary weapon, then it will become a chaotic nightmare to deal with when it's used en masse, and it will be if this weapon, can reliably replace an LMG on the heavy assault. And while that argument can be made for every weapon in the game, having squads of players on either side using this weapon to cake a choke point in explosive damage that is enough to easily combat people in 1v1s will just create an experience that stagnates fights further and see people getting very annoyed very quickly. It simply cannot be balanced to be competitive in a 1v1 environment, which counteracts the whole heavy assault's entire role on the battlefield of carving a path through enemy lines for a squad. So in turn, it's never going to be a weapon that I can confidently say will be a good pick when putting it in the primary weapon slot. You just don't have the ability to remain competitive at the role that you have on the field in the first place. Here's the thing, right? The Thumper, at its core, is very much a utility weapon. Meanwhile, all of your LMGs and such are very much designed to be the spearhead, which again just creates this awkward relationship. However, if you do have the ASP perk that allows you to equip the weapon in your secondary slot, that's when opportunities begin to open up. As a secondary weapon, it's a great offhand option that gives you some half-decent area saturation capabilities to break a choke point hold or create a pain field of damage that enemies will struggle to get through. There have been times where I have scored a pretty sweet flank on an enemy position, and after sending them a few rounds of 40mm worth of freedom, they scatter like ants, allowing for the squad or the faction to push up. When this weapon isn't throttling you as a primary weapon, it actually brings a nice utility to the heavy assault that you don't normally have access to beforehand, and when used in that context, the weapon can be a good time in the right situation. But that context will only apply to a very slim amount of players who have both gotten to ASP and then have decided to drop a point into the heavy assault, heavy weapon secondary access, option. Unfortunately, the weapon just isn't going to be effective for a wide variety of players with the way that it's been implemented into the game right now, which is a shame because I know the devs brought it out to give the NS operatives a heavy weapon of choice. So what can be done to the weapon to make it more useful to more players? Well, unfortunately, the two suggestions I have are going to seem rather drastic, but for a weapon that is such a utility piece at its core, it isn't going to come down to balancing the weapon itself to better fit it into the heavy assault's role, but instead changing how the weapon fits into the grand scheme of things with the classes. I propose that the weapon either gets transferred to the heavy assault's tool slot to become a more AI, infantry-focused, launcher, if you will, a more crowd control-based launcher, something we don't have in the game yet, or that the weapon gets moved to the engineer's tool slot to potentially replace the turret, which is obviously designed for choke point defense, and that's kind of what this weapon is designed to do. Obviously, this will remove the weapon from the heavy assault weapon category of the game, but once again, unless the devs allow this weapon to become a secondary weapon by default, it just doesn't have the brunt behind it to justify sacrificing an LMG on your loadout. Giving it to the engineer or placing it in the heavy's tool slot will allow for it to see some more utility-based use on the battlefield without feeling like such a gimp to use in the first place. I would personally rather the cost-to-benefit ratio of the weapon being equipped to be adjusted rather than having the weapon outright buffed to the point where the battlefield becomes some huge grenade fest. But that's just one man's opinion. I would love to know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Just quickly on the attachment options, the only attachment option I found any use in right now is the launch accelerator to give it just a bit more range. The ammunition types are once again a little too utility oriented for me to justify using on the heavy right now. And just to clarify, the incendiary ammo's damage stacking effect that was meant to go live in the last patch has not, so I wouldn't recommend taking it just yet. Anyway guys, with all that said, that wraps up today's review of the Thumper. As you guys know by now, my opinion on the weapon isn't that grand, and I'm hoping that the devs take the time to improve it as time goes on, but we can only remain so hopeful, guys. If you guys enjoyed today's video, a backhanding of that like button would be greatly appreciated, and let me know what kind of content you guys want to see in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video and you're new here, consider backhanding that subscribe button as well, guys, and follow me on all my social media links down below, including Twitch, Twitter, and Discord. Hope you guys all have a fantastic day. Thank you again for watching the video. Peace out, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Take care, guys. Have a good one.